So, I thought it was kind of fun doing a reverse culture shock video and talk about the differences between Sweden and Holland, or Sweden and the Netherlands, after being in the Netherlands after 10 years again on my summer trip. So let's get started. Okay, found myself another bench, sun in the background. So let's start with this little list of things that gave me reverse culture shock being back in Holland after 10 years. Weirdly enough, Holland feels more modern than Sweden does. And I'm mainly talking about buildings. If you drive through the Netherlands and you look at all the buildings, like in cities and even in the countryside, it feels more modern. Somehow. Like, it seems that Sweden's buildings are a little bit stuck in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I don't know. It's just, I can't really explain it, but Holland just feels more modern. And I think that has to do with Holland being the center of Europe's commerce again. What do I mean by that? I mean mostly Rotterdam. Rotterdam has the biggest or one of the biggest harbors. Lots of products that come into Europe come through Rotterdam. And that is good for the economy, and that is good for product and commerce. And, you know, I think that helps Holland a lot to be more modern than Sweden. Also, Sweden is so far away from everything that import just isn't a big thing. I mean, of course, they import products here, but just not as much because it's more expensive. And therefore, I think that may be a reason. I'm just speculating here. I just can't get away from the feeling that the Netherlands feels more modern when you're walking around there than Sweden. Now, a second part of that is that the Netherlands also feels more modern in a technological sense. I remember when I was living in Holland 10 years ago, I had limitless internet with a very good speed, which I mean to say that I could use the internet as much as I wanted to. There was no limit to how many gigabytes I was allowed to use per month, and the speeds were good. I could watch videos and YouTube and everything without having to wait for the video to buffer. Now that is actually pretty new in Sweden, especially if you live in the countryside. Internet was, for the longest time, had a limit on it here in the Swedish countryside. You had like only 100 gigabytes per month or something, and then the speeds were pretty awful. You had to wait for your videos to buffer and blah blah blah. Now, I would say that has only changed in the last 3 years. I would say in the last 3 years I have had limitless internet and a pretty good speed. Nowadays I can watch a Netflix movie Nowadays I can watch a Netflix movie in HD quality without having to wait for it to buffer. But that's also because I put some expensive 300 euro antennas on my roof. Otherwise I still wouldn't get that speed. But it's possible now, at least. And there are multiple things that just, if you look at technology back in the Netherlands and technology here in Sweden, they're just a few steps behind here in Sweden. Of course, I am 100% certain that if you go to big cities like Stockholm, Uppsala, Jönköping, then stuff is more modern over there. But that's cities. If you live in the rest of Sweden, and most of Sweden isn't cities, technology is just a little bit behind. It's also the computers at my work, the computers you see in libraries, the computers you see in schools. It's all just a few steps behind. I interrupt this program because I am standing here at the side of a lake, and apparently the water is moving underneath the ice, and I could actually hear the ice moving. So, yeah, I think I'm gonna sit here and record the ice for a while and see if we can hear it move. I'll show you that at the end of the video. I'm just gonna sit down here and keep talking about the differences between Holland and Sweden, or the Netherlands and Sweden. Please don't get angry every time I say Holland. It's just easier, and Netherlands is such a big word and blah 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 blah. I'm actually from Holland, and most people around the world call the Netherlands Holland anyway. Just, I'm sorry. Okay, so the next thing that is something that surprised me after being back in Holland after 10 years was that people take more space. Like, there's not only more people in Holland than there is in Sweden, people also take more space. What I mean by that, like, personal space in Sweden seems to be quite important. People give each other space. If they stand in line for something, if they're waiting on the bus, if they're sitting on the train, people give each other space. Not so much in Holland. Like, there is still personal space, but it's not as big as in Sweden. If you stand in line for something in Holland, people tend to stand a bit closer to you. If you are walking on a busy street, people might walk straight towards you in Holland and expect you to move aside. In Sweden, everybody just kind of moves aside for each other. And also in traffic, when there's a lot of cars around, people just don't give each other that much space. So everybody seems to require more space for themselves in Holland. They demand that you give them space. In Sweden, it's that people give you space, and they would like it if you give them space too. So there's a difference in attitude right there. But Dutch people also need more space when it comes to sound. People talk louder. They talk less nice to each other. I'm not saying that Dutch people aren't nice, but the language is more direct. And in Sweden, the language is more like trying not to insult anybody. I'm not saying that everybody in Holland is a jerk. I'm just saying that if you take the entire population as a whole, I would say that the Dutch people are just a little bit more direct. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. When I was working in Holland, I liked it when my boss told me, "Hey, Steve, you're doing this wrong. I would like you to do it this way." It's clear, it's easy to understand, and you just change what you're doing so that your boss is happy. And there's no hard feelings. People just know that it's a little bit more direct. And in Sweden, when you do something wrong at work, it's a little bit more like, "Hey, yeah, today didn't go so well, right? Yeah, I wonder what we can do about it. And yeah, I hope tomorrow is going to be a better day." And they know damn well what was wrong that day. They know that you did something wrong. But they're not going to tell you that you did something wrong. They're just going to hint about that something isn't the way it's supposed to be and hope you get the hint to change it the next day. And I don't like that. I mean, I'm not... It's not clear communication. It's just hoping that they will understand what you're saying. I like the clear communication. So yeah, that's a definite difference. Now, another thing I can show you right now. I'm sitting on this bench, right? I'm sitting on this bench next to this lake, and this bench is a plank and a couple of logs. The bench over there is a little bit better. I mean, it's charming, but this one is a bit more better quality. It's made out of plastic and metal. Now, in Holland or in the Netherlands, when you go to a public space, it seems that there is more money available for public spaces in the Netherlands. Um, Here, when this lake is right next to a city here, and when I'm walking around it on the path, it's a gravel path, and it has this charming little wood bench, and there is this little fireplace here. You know, it's nice and charming. But in Holland, this bench would have also been out of metal and plastic. This fireplace would have probably been made out of concrete, if you're even allowed to make fire in Holland. But there seems to be more money available to spend in Holland for public places. The gravel road that I am walking on around this lake, in Holland, that would have been made out of, tiles and or tarmac. It's just more organized and there's more money available. Um, I think that's both a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it looks nice, it looks like somebody's taking care of it, money has been spent there, it's accessible for people in a wheelchair. Those are all good things for Holland. But the bad part is that you'd lose the connection to nature. Like, this bench is way more charming. The gravel road just feels like you're more in nature. And I like that too. So I don't know which of the two is better. I don't think any of them is better. They're just two different ways to deal with it. But it's definitely a difference between Holland and Sweden. Of course, there are going to be parks in Sweden that are being well taken care of. But there's so much nature in Sweden, so many parks, so many hikes, that if they're going to spend the same amount of money that Holland does and all that, I don't think there's going to be money left in Sweden. So that's another difference that I saw when I was back in Holland that I didn't really think about while I was living in Sweden for 10 years not visiting Holland. Now, the next one has to do with the last one, and we can see it right here. Yeah, the big obvious thing is nature. There is so much more nature in Sweden than there is in Holland. Doesn't surprise anybody, right? That didn't surprise me. But somehow, when I went back to Holland after 10 years, it still was surprising. And why was it surprising? Like, I knew from the start that Holland doesn't have as much forest, mountains, lakes, or just in general nature as Sweden does. But when I went back, I was just surprised at how little nature there is in Holland. Like, where I used to live in Pijnacker, there is this little patch of forest where people walk their dogs. And that patch of forest, if you take an hour, you would have gone through the circle of path that's in that forest at least 2 or 3 times. That's how small that forest was. Now here people still get lost for days or weeks in forest in Sweden. Driving from Groningen all the way to Belgium through Holland, driving on those roads, all you see is fields, farmers' fields, and cities and villages, and every once in a while you see a patch of trees, but Holland doesn't have enough forest. Holland does not have enough nature. I'm sure, like, imagine this. Aliens come, right? And they put a glass dome over Sweden. I'll be fine. There's nothing gonna happen to me, right? Now, if aliens come and they put a glass dome over Holland, I think we'll all suffocate. I don't think there's gonna be enough air produced by the trees in Holland for everybody to breathe. So, yeah, big difference. Now, the fifth and the last one of this video is not so much a difference between Sweden and Holland, but more of a difference between what I remember and what I saw. Apparently, your memories distort a lot over 10 years. Anyway, I remember the Dutch people being a lot more mean than they actually were. I was so surprised at how nice everybody was in Holland. And I know if you listen to people that aren't from Holland, like Americans or French people or Germans or even Swedish people that have visited Holland, they say everybody's so nice there. Like, if you want evidence of that, just watch Spider-Man Far From Home. There's a scene in there where he's in Holland, and there's actually some of our Dutch actors in prison in that movie, which is funny. But everybody in that movie is shown to be very nice, and I kind of forgot that. I think I remember everybody being much meaner. But when I got back to Holland after 10 years, I was also pleasantly surprised like how nice everybody is. So kudos to everybody living in the Netherlands. You're all nice people. I don't know why I remember everybody being much meaner. It's weird that way. But, you know, I got surprised in a good way. The reason, sorry, this arm got tired, so I have to carry the camera with my left arm now. Yeah, the reason I haven't gone back to Holland for 10 years was like mostly because I didn't have a reason to go back. There was nothing there that I needed to go to. But I also was like kind of against going back to Holland because like I was expecting lots of traffic, people being mean, no, there not being nature, and you know, 2 of those 3 things are true. There is a lot of traffic, there's not a lot of nature, but people weren't mean. And I guess that makes it easier to return to Holland for me on vacations or on trips the next time. So I want to thank Andrew again for inspiring me to make this video. He made a video about culture shock between Sweden and America. I will link to it in the description. You guys go show him some love. Go in his comments and say, hey, Stico sent us, thank you. And subscribe to my channel and see you all next time. Bye! Oh yeah, and I'm sorry. I promised you sounds of the ice on the lake, but all the time I was sitting there, it didn't make a sound anymore. Apparently it was just a one-time thing, and I missed filming it. Sorry, but thank you for watching to the end. Bye. YouTube says you might enjoy this video. Go ahead and give it a try.